Since the dawn of time, the Earth has borne witness to creatures great and powerful, the epitomes of the continuous battle of natural selection that has spanned countless millennia. Now observe the greatest of these Promethea born from the infinitely spanning cosmos, a culmination of eons of evolution and the pinnacle of all creation. Hey, remember Spore? That kind of great, but kind of terrible game made by Maxis, published by EA, and is still somewhat unparalleled in its creative freedom, even though it came out in 2008. I love a game with a good creation engine, something that lets me freely express myself by making a funny little man with a leaf where his penis should be, or a horrifying monstrosity that not any kind of deity could even look upon without a wrinkled nose, and frankly makes me a little sick to look at as well. And boy, did Spore give me the freedom to do one of those things. Most of you might remember Spore let you do that because it's what made it so popular. But then there was also like a whole video game around it, and that video game was mostly bad. It was a survival game, another survival game, an RTS, another RTS, whatever the space stage was. These parts of the game where you don't get to finally graft limbs onto the Eraserhead baby come across as somewhat mediocre. If you were to measure this game on a ratio of fun, entertaining Monster Masher to weird, janky strategy game, you'd probably be looking at a ratio of about 1 to 10, and that 1 has got all the fun in it. But if that's the case, then why do so many people still feel such a draw to play it after 14 years? I'm just going to pause for a moment and let the harsh reality of time sink in. Oh, existential dread, how do you get here? In order to answer that question, we first need to acknowledge what a triumph it is for a game that's almost entirely single-player and has received no updates over a decade to still have an active player base after so long. Especially when I introduce you to my good friend, On Disc DRM. We're not actually friends, I want them to be dead. DRM, short for Digital Rights Management, was a really hot-button issue in 2008. Used to control and manage access to copyrighted material. The Spore installation disk wouldn't allow itself to be downloaded more than a few times, essentially locking itself down to prevent disk sharing, which was a common practice back when disks were, a thing that you'd share. What this meant was that you could install it on a laptop and a desktop, maybe even lend it to a friend or two for them to check out this really neat game that you've been singing the praises of because you love to share these experiences. And you are completely unaware of the sinister corporate stonewall you've been gradually, unwittingly constructing around this very thing that you treasure because you are, quite literally, 12? So let's say a few years go by and eventually your early 2000s hard drive and AMD Duron processor craps out and you upgrade your computer because that's what you do, EA, that's what people do. The DRM lock would finally kick in and prevent the game from ever being installed from your disk again, turning a pretty fun and expensive toy into a functionless hunk of shiny trash. In spite of this heinous action, basically causing you to re-buy a piece of garbage subject to the whims of manufactured obsolescence, people still play Spore, and they play it hard. Just look at the amazing things people have been making and sharing in the years since this game came out. Sit back with me and roll through some footage of these great monoliths of creativity. This website, the Spore.com Sporepedia, as outdated and slightly broken as it may be, is still brimming with these wonderful examples of art, and I do mean it when I say that this is art. Like, you can see the amount of time and care that has gone into some of these creations, and the process people have gone through to begin adopting a recognizable style. Like Solacram's delightfully edgy aliens and demons, outfitted with an intense array of feathers and horns. or 321 Aerobird, who has spent years meticulously creating models of actual birds, mostly, going as far as to even include noticeable differences in dimorphism within species, and it's just absolutely brimming with passion and talent. And then we have one of my favorites, Twarzasilka, who's manufactured a magnificent menagerie of machines inspired by the Monster Hunter franchise. In fact, if there is a game with replicable creatures, chances are hundreds of them will already have been made, and made extremely well, in Spore. Not just Monster Hunter, but also games like Subnautica, Undertale, even Terraria, all fully realized in gooey meat form, standing as a heartwarming example of the human desire to express ourselves through art. Wow, wasn't that great? Doesn't it make you almost forget about all the bad stuff? What's even better is, you can download all of these creatures to add to your games and use and edit as you see fit. Oh, wait, what's that? EA hasn't maintained Spore's online servers, and managing to log into the Spore browser is a huge pain in the ass because you have to navigate netcode that hasn't been updated in over a decade? Huh, how about that? Okay, but still, like I said, people are playing it. A lot of people, actually, and they're having a good time because in spite of this terrible meddling from an awful publisher and 90% of this game being bad, it's because the other 10% are unlike any video game that has existed before or since. I mean that with 100% sincerity. There is a freedom to mold creations like fleshy pottery and gradually learn the tools to make your beast more wretched and sublime than ever before. I think a huge part of it wasn't just that you were creating art, but you were creating a living part of your world, the kind of thing that could show up in subsequent playthroughs and become an integrated part of your game. And I made possibly several hundred unique monsters before my arch nemesis delivered that fatal blow. I remember when I first fell victim to the cruel hand of Spore's on-disc DRM, and I was unable to play this game, which had all of my creative endeavors over the past few years neatly filed away on a corrupted hard drive, and I thought to myself, oh well, this game is so innovative that surely some other company will make a newer, better one in the next few years. Unfortunately, as should be evident by the immense amount of content on Spore's webpage, the community aspect was a big part of what made this game so appealing for a lot of people. You see, it wasn't just a place for uploading creatures, it was a board of discussion. People would hold creation contests, exchange pleasantries about each other's weird little guys, and most importantly, they would make friends. But like I said, Spore hasn't been maintained in over a decade. Neither have its online services. There has not, and probably never will be, a game quite like it. So while there are still regular uploads to this site, millions of them just remain as ghosts. The last creation from Silicram was uploaded on the 12th of May, 2012. Unlike most of their other creations, this one only has a single comment. Are you still there, old friend? As surprisingly innovative as Spore was, that didn't stop it from being extremely rough in many regards, which made it a hard game for me to want to get back into, after suffering such a tremendous loss. The gameplay was split up into 5 stages based on your evolutionary progression, and each one of these was majorly flawed in a sometimes charming, sometimes depressing way. The Cell stage was kind of fun, sharing a lot of the same complexity with hit Flash games of the same era, but it quickly donned the mask of a boring, simplistic, and overly long prelude to the real meat of the game. The Creature stage, where you'd get to make creatures, scavenging for new animal parts to create the most creature of all time. And this was the bit that most people will remember fondly, because that was what the game was primarily sold on. These prospects of exploration, evolution, and unbridled creativity. However, the gameplay that wasn't linked to the creator itself was dull and simplistic, involving spamming 4 buttons to kill monsters or a Simon Says-esque minigame to befriend them over and over and over again. The randomly generated worlds looked like ass and were way too samey. Limitations of the game made your creatures in the overworld look like a literal demon from hell crawled into your microwave and said, "Nah man, it's okay, turn it on for like 30 seconds. the tribal stage was baby's first RTS game, the civilization stage was grandpa's final RTS game, and then there's the space stage. So, to get into the spirit of writing this video, I did what had planned to be a full replay of Spore, from pathetic sopping wet microbe to ultimate galactic super beam. Every single section except for the creature stage, because I went out of my way to dig through innumerable corpses for monster parts, took less than an hour to complete. And I have the achievements to prove it. But now we have the space stage, where you can fly off the planet where everything else had taken place on, and explore the entire solar system. Oh, did I say solar system? I meant entire local nebula. Oh, I'm sorry, did I say local nebula? I meant the entire galaxy. Everything else in this game took place on just one of these now microscopic planets, and it is audacious to know that this game was sold on the basis of evolving monsters when that, as well as the cell stage, tribal stage, and so on, encompasses a fraction of a fraction of a fraction of this grand finale. And what sucks is, I don't think I ever knew a single person who didn't just give up as soon as this weird little gremlin showed up, because this whole, relatively much more complicated space sim is not what they played the game for. It's really weird that they tried to mishmash all these other game modes together into one unified piece, when an immeasurable amount of the content is delegated to this final fifth. Because it means you've got this kind of mess of a game that practically every person who plays it isn't going to like a large portion of. Anyway, so we've established that the game was both backloaded and half-baked, but people love this creation software, right? So what happens is, they release a DLC called the Creepy and Cute Parts Pack, which was a way overpriced thing that you also had to get on a disc, which added a bunch of new parts for your creatures. And then Maxis said, bam! Spore Galactic Adventures, a whole new sci-fi chapter that let people create their own sort of games, kind of, that were pretty clunky and a bit restrictive and sort of weird, but it was this other creative outlet that basically allowed you to design entire levels and worlds of your own, instead of just individual monsters and cities. And then they said, oh, people really like these creative tools? Well, you know what people will also love? Only the cool and refreshing taste of the esteemed Dr. Pepper's own private reserve, available now at the Bells and the Bees. And only for 1 year in 2010. And, oh, if you don't live in the USA, well, how about instead of getting Dr. Pepper, you can get Maine, too. I hate that state. EA, with all the brilliant business strategery that they could muster, made the decision to have a very exclusivity deal with DRGD Pepper to access the Robot Parts Pack. If you're wondering how this went over with fans, especially after the whole DRM thing, the answer to that would be not great. We'll get back to ripping apart EA's completely incomprehensibly moronic business decisions in a bit, but for me, the poor little British girl who was completely alienated from the existence of the Cowboy Hat restaurant and funny little taco rat, this, Galactic Adventures, was the game changer. I couldn't even begin to estimate the number of hours I spent mastering these tools of level design, creating spooky dungeons with different boss encounters, exploring haunted tombs, escaping a prison planet, raiding a lost temple ruled over by a malicious deity of flesh and bone. I did it all. I could redesign pared down levels of entire video games in this engine, and I could see my future as the greatest level designer in the world unfolding before my eyes until DRM locked me out of the game and everything was lost. But hey, I still had a lot of fun. From the surface, one could look at Spore as a game that tried a bit too much of everything, a jack of all trades, master of none. But I'd say it did master a couple things, and it wasn't the RTS, or the survival game, or even the incomprehensibly girthy space colony sim. It was just the spirit of creativity. Something even a 10-year-old can grasp and use to create unique animals and buildings, and entire scenarios involving a village of weird aliens being attacked by bipedal fish corpses, and also the Pope is there and he's a crab or something. I love this game, dude. And it crushes me that it's barely there anymore. Online services had their guts ripped out. The modding scene is a huge pain to get into. And the complete version of the game is still kind of pricey. One of the expansion packs is completely unavailable officially, and there has been nothing like this game since it came out. Nothing as approachable or easy to use that isn't just a straight-up dev toolkit. But it's still there, I guess. I think the part that makes me the most upset about it is that EA knew they had a big thing on their hands when they started releasing new games like Spore Heroes on the Wii, Spore Creatures and Hero Arena for the DS, Spore Origins on mobile, the standalone Creature Creator release on PC, and many of these existed because people just loved that one part of the game so much. And then of course there's Darkspore. Okay. Keep this quiet. You didn't hear this from me, but I heard that EA released a game called Darkspore back in 2011, and it was just too cool for public consumption. After the DRM issue with Spore went over so well with fans, they just doubled down. And what better way to protect their intellectual property than by making sure that after 5 years, the game would be completely erased from existence. Darkspore, the always online single-player action RPG that used the Spore creature creation engine, was taken offline after just a few years, making it not only completely obsolete, but even impossible to play with a pirated copy. This game was scrubbed from the annals of history, never to be seen again. Since Spore's inception, there has been a war being waged against itself, and the conflict boils down to how much of a price can you put on creativity? EA isn't a stranger to scorning the cow it's so thoroughly milking. You can just look at the monstrously pricey Sims DLC for evidence of that. But the battle there reached a stalemate. They let developers work with the customers by endorsing and supporting a framework for mods and designing a better online sharing interface. I would never go so far as to call the death of Spore a necessary evil to reach that end. I wouldn't even go so far as to call it dead, but I sure as hell can't fight anymore. It was up against an industry titan, fully intent on siphoning every possible penny they could in whatever means they deemed necessary. Whether it was using extremely invasive DRM to try and mitigate piracy, ludicrously priced DLC and exclusivity deals, innumerable spin-offs on every casual platform, until the well ran bone dry. Spore from the get-go was unfathomably ambitious for its time, the No Man's Sky of the 2000s. But the difference between the two is that No Man's Sky got free support, Spore got, like, meticulously vivisected for parts by a mad scientist. So, turns out maybe once in a blue moon, DRM is kind of the worst thing ever. Crazy, huh? Anyway, even though Darkspore may have single-handedly killed EA's faith in Spore as a franchise and dissolved Maxis as a studio, dropping the chance of a new Spore game being released to somewhere in the range of never in a billion years, there's still so many strong attachments people have to the original. Making creatures and buildings and vehicles and spaceships and adventures, and then sharing them with the world. Seeing what other people made and maybe playing with their creations too. And yeah, it sucks that it's not the same as it used to be, and we probably won't see a game like it for a long while still, but a lot of those things people made are still there, and there's nothing stopping us from making new things, you know, just for ourselves. I don't think anything helped better fuel and develop my ability to be creative and express myself than Spore. Not since I first put pencil to paper and realized that I could draw whatever I wanted. I can kind of make whatever I want here too. Yeah. Hey, fun side note, I was so young when I played this game that I honestly thought this was how evolution actually worked in real life. Like, you just rub up on some bones and you'd get DNA that would let you grow antlers. Never did I think to try this in real life though. Huge missed opportunity. Anyway, thank you for watching my video. Links to my socials are in the description, and links to new videos are on the screen right now, so you can go and enjoy those if you like. See you in the next one.